My first guest this evening is a phenomenon in the world of publishing. In 2011, it was estimated that 1/4 of all hardcover suspense thriller novels sold were written by him. And he is the first author to reach 10 million ebooks sold. He holds the Guinness record for the most #1 New York Times bestsellers of any author ever. He's created the Alex Cross, Michael Bennett, and Women's Murder Club series, and he's now taking the young adult and middle grade world by storm. I sat down with him recently at his home in Florida to discuss his life, how he's changed the way books are written and marketed, and why getting kids to read has become his #1 passion. Here's my exclusive interview with the one and only James Patterson. We were talking before we started about the many initiatives that you are a part of and that you are taking, really spending your time and career on, whether it's documentaries, the books. You've become an evangelist for reading. Tell me, if you had to sum all of this up, what are you trying to do?
Look, as individuals, we can't really do an awful lot about global warming or the health care situation. But as individuals, we can, make sure the kids in our family are good readers. We can do that. And that's key. Because if these kids, if they're not competent readers, or there are two levels. One, they're really smart kids. If they don't read enough, their focus is going to be like this.
Right.
We want them to be looking at this way so that they really can see the world in all its gray glory. It's not just black and white. It's and the more they read, the more they're going to see how complex issues are. And then for a lot of other kids, if by the time they get out of middle school, if they're not competent readers, how are they going to go through high school? The circumference, it's not going to happen. It's too hard.
Terrible.
They look at it as hopeless, and they're right. So we have to get more of those kids, a lot more of those kids reading. So I have, right now, over 400 scholarships at 22 universities for kids that want to be teachers. So that's one of the things. We have various, like at the universities, what I want to do there at every university is have them reach out into their communities.
What does that mean?
Well, at Vanderbilt, for example, where I went to graduate school, we have a program where, in addition to the scholarships for kids in their School of Education, we have kids, at-risk kids coming in from Nashville every Saturday and all through the summer. So we're stimulating the university to step outside of itself. And we're doing the same thing with Michigan State and East Lansing. They're stepping outside. We're going to do it at Wisconsin and Madison. Step outside, bring the kids in here. Let your students see what they're going to deal with when they get out. That's good. Yeah. If every kid in this country was a competent reader, about 60% of our problems would disappear.
You believe that?
Oh yeah. I'm convinced. I'm convinced.
Let me take you back from the very beginning. It's important, I think.
Okay.
Tell me from the birth on. Tell me about Charles, your father, Isabel, your mother, what you took from them. He was an insurance man. She was a homemaker.
She was a teacher. She was a
teacher.
Yeah, my mother's a teacher in Catholic schools. Yeah, until from when she was in her 20s until her mid-70s.
And you think some of this passion you're now exercising comes from that?
Yeah, and my grandparents. Actually, the biggest influences on me were my grandparents. My grandmother was very tough, but she was, you can do. She said, you're not going to play in the NBA, which hurt my feelings. But she said, you have a lot of potential. You can do a lot of things, and that doesn't always happen in lower middle class families. They can't imagine that somebody that the world is open to you, theoretically at least. And my grandfather was he used to take me on his delivery route when I was a little kid during the summer. And I go one day a week, and we go over the Storm King Mountain toward West Point, and he'd always be singing. He had a terrible voice, and he'd be driving his delivery truck.
At the top of his voice.
5 o'clock in the morning, and he's singing "Oh Susanna" and put another nickel in it, and whatever And he said to me, he said, Jim, I don't care what you do when you grow up. I don't care if you become the president or if you wind up driving a truck the way I do. He said, but just remember, when you go over the mountain to work in the morning, you got to be singing. And I do. People will say, well, aren't you ever going to retire? And I'll say, you don't retire from play. And that's what I do. I'm playing because it's so enjoyable for me.
I'm going to get into the sheer number of books you produce each year, which is, to me, having struggled.
This is going to be like an epic movie, huh? We're going to go for
this
like,
is going to be the ultimate. I'm going to call this the ultimate James Patterson.
Okay.
Tell me about working at J. Walter Thompson. You worked your way up from a copyman to CEO of that company.
Yeah.
How did that add mind? Looking at a consumer and saying,
I don't know what that means. I was in advertising, but I've been clean for 20 years now, so I'm really shocked that you would bring that up, that dark stain of my past. I think the only insight with respect to me as an individual or in terms of the books is that when I went in there, like everybody else, we think we know it all. So I'm 25 or 24, whatever I was. I know how to do this. Advertising makes you aware that there's an audience. And so you can't be arrogant anymore because you put out your little communication and then they'll do some research and they go, nobody listened, nobody cared. And you go, oh, there's actually an audience. So if you're writing a commercial for trucks, you have to imagine if it came on in a bar, would anybody pay attention or would they just continue to do whatever the heck they're doing and pay no attention to the football, So it's that kind of thing. It's and I think that's the only useful thing in terms of the books.
But it does give you a sensitivity to what the audience wants. You obviously have to shape your message, Jim, to them, and economy. You're dealing with a very small amount of time.
You mean doing ads?
Right. I mean, this is tight writing, which I see in your books. These chapters are 3 pages.
Yeah, I don't know that was anything I learned in advertising. The influence there really was, when I was in college, I was more of a literary snob myself. And some of the books I read back then, I think, really got me to see, like Evan Connell Jr. A lot of people wouldn't have read him, but he wrote a book, Mr. Bridge, and a book, Mrs. Bridge. And they're all 2, 3, 4-page chapters, and they're very tight and quite wonderful. They're wonderful books. There's a book called Steps, which he didn't write, Painted Bird, Jerzy Kaczynski. Yes. Those books got me.
Very tight chapters.
Yeah, and that was the influence to me in terms of small chapters, not advertising. I mean, some of my favorite books are very difficult. 100 Years of Solitude, Ulysses. Oh, yeah. And the influence there is that those books made it very clear to me, I am not going to write a great novel. I could write, I think, a pretty good literary novel, but not a great one. And I don't want to write pretty good. I'd rather be a great entertainer than a pretty good literary novelist.
That's how you see yourself as an entertainer?
Yeah. An entertainer who is really doing somersaults and to try to do the right thing and give back or whatever. I write for myself. I write, I like mysteries. So I write the kind of mysteries that I would like to read. I'm still in touch with myself as a child. So I write the kind of children's books that I would like to read. I'm very aware of that you really have to keep kids' attentions.
Absolutely.
Or they're off doing something else. You don't want, my thing with the kids' books is I want a kid to read one of my books and go, give me another book. Whether it's my book or somebody else's book, just like I like that.
Everywhere I turn, I was on an airport the other day, and there were 3 people on my plane with your books: Zoo, your new romance book, and one of the Alex Cross books.
Yeah, good plane.
Yeah, it was a good plane for you.
I don't get that fun as much as I used to because of the e-readers now.
Oh,
I can't tell what they're reading. I used to be able to. Yeah, I know.
Go to the bathroom and look. You'll recognize it.
No, you talk about the readers. I don't know about President Obama, but every other president for the last 20 years has been a fan. I just spent, which was unbelievable, Sue and I just spent an hour with President Clinton last week. And he, I don't know.
Well, he would always have
He
your books.
he said that he's read just about everything, which is great. I mean, because he's a bright guy. And anyway, it was a wonderful hour to spend with somebody.
Tell me from your first mystery, the one that really
The Thomas
drew
Berryman
everybody's
number.
acclaim was the Thomas Berryman number, and
Right.
you won the Edgar Award. And you said of that book, the sentences are superior to a lot of the stuff I write now. Why would you say that?
Why? Because it's true. Yeah, it was better writing. The story wasn't as good. It wasn't as the storytelling. And sometimes writing gets in the way of storytelling. A lot of times. And there are a lot of good writers out there that really don't tell very good stories. There are more good writers than there are storytellers, in my opinion.
How do you create a book that people just won't put down? I know that's your intention. Is it
Yeah,
architecture? Is it a question of architecture?
I don't know. Michael Connolly, who's, I think, a very good mystery writer, Michael said about my stuff, he said, what Jim does is every single chapter moves both the characterization and the plot forward and turns on the movie projector in our heads. So I think that sort of sums up a lot of it, in that I think character, to some extent, is best revealed through action. It's not sort of what we say as much as what we do. You could sit there and say you're the sweetest person in the world, but do your actions. So, and certainly in mysteries and thrillers, how people act is crucial. And then that turning on the movie projector in people's heads have to do with visual writing. That you can. I write scenes for the most part. It tends to be very straight ahead. I'm just going to take you through scene by scene by scene. The scenes are going to be very tight. They're usually built around something. Look, I mean, you're telling somebody's story. There are not an infinite, but there's an incredible number of possible scenes. You have to decide which scenes tell the story best. And then once you pick the scene, what is that scene built around? What's the drama there? What's the chemistry? What's making that scene work? And then try to make sure that you have it. When I write outlines, when I work with other
And you write
writers,
outlines that's how you start each book.
Yes.
How detailed are those outlines? We're talking 30, 40 pages, right?
Oh, they can be 70 or 80 pages, but because there are a lot of chapters.
Yeah.
But each chapter is only about a paragraph. And I'm trying to condense it to what is the idea of that chapter, what is the thing, what's going to drive that scene, and then which makes it easier to judge it.
Do you write daily?
Oh yeah, 7 days a week.
And longhand?
Yes, tragically.
Why?
I don't know. It's working.
Is it because it's more direct?
It's
just,
working.
It's always
too
worked for you.
difficult to make the transition now, and I don't see any need to. Maybe in my 80s.
It's a
It'll
goal
be an
for you.
amusement to make the switch over to writing on
Now,
a computer.
you are capable of churning out 10 absolutely
Churning butter?
Well, no,
Churning-
churning out, and I mean this in the best way. To consistently
You mean crafting?
crafting, shaping, producing,
Yeah.
and these are addictive books to read, all of them, across genres. And in my family, we've got multiple levels of Patterson fans who are reading different books.
Yeah.
How do you maintain 10 projects? How do you juggle 10 projects at one time, Jim?
I don't find it difficult. All right, this is another advertising influence.
Okay.
Because when you're running an agency, you have so many different projects that just have to go on at the same time.
Right.
So you get used to moving from one to now. On the positive side, what that does is writer's block, never heard of it. Because if I am blocked a little bit, I just go to another project. So it's very useful in that sense. No stress, no pressure. I don't feel any stress at all.
None at all.
Zero.
How many collaborators do you have?
I don't know.
Ghostwriter.
Why?
Not ghostwriter.
Are you looking for a job?
I might be. I'll give you the resume on my way out.
I don't. I should, because that question gets asked occasionally. I don't know. I would say 7 or 8 probably.
How do you divide the labor? When
How does it work?
Yeah, right. You write the outline. You give
You
that
ready?
to
We alternate
Collaborate.
words. No, yeah, okay. No, I'll write a long outline, and then I suggest that I'd like them to contribute to the outline, partly because I want their contribution, partly because I want them invested, which is even more important. And then they go off, they do the first draft. I want to see pages every 2 or 3 weeks, which is not the way publishers do it.
No.
Because a publisher, you work for a year and a half, and it comes in and they go, this isn't exactly what I was thinking. I was expecting something, doesn't work that way with me. After I'll be going like, great, keep going, or hold it, we're off the tracks, and let's talk about how it happened and what we do about it, et cetera. But it's a lot easier to deal with 2 weeks worth of writing than it is to deal with a year and a half polished, oh my God, my life is depending on this kind of thing. And then after I get a draft in, I will do however many drafts from one to...
You write repeated drafts of that one?
Yes, yeah.
Wow. How many normally?
Lately, it's more 1 and 2. In the past, it was more 3 and 4. But most of the people I work with now, I've worked with them for a while. They know, and we just have it.
You have the
one
process now.
Once the voice is established, it becomes a lot easier to do so. That's why you can have a television series with maybe 8 writers.
Right.
Once the voice is in people's heads, they know how Tom Selleck is going to, how he's going to talk in Blue Bloods or whatever.
Right. So you're sort of the James Patterson showrunner. So this is where all the magic happens.
Something happens, I don't know what, but it happens every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Wow.
And what you see here is these are all live projects right now.
All around the room.
All the way around. These are kid stuff. Witch and Wizard, middle school football is my life. Humans, Confessions. And then on this side, adult, Women Murder Club 14, Truth or Die, Private Rome, Private Paris, Private India. This series we do it all over the world because it's an investigative.
Detective series.
But they have offices everywhere. Private Vegas.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever.
And this doesn't frighten you, walking in and seeing whatever. There's got to be 25 or 30 projects alive
I don't
here.
think I'm terribly neurotic. So why would it? I don't know why it would.
Doesn't make you feel under the gun? I mean, you're under contract for these books. You have to turn them in at a given time, yes?
I think I'm 30-some% of Little Brown's revenue, so they're really not going to give me that hard a time, honestly. And I've never been late. Their issue with me is not too few. It's too many books.
Too many.
Like, oh my God. Yeah.
Well, initially they thought you were going to cannibalize your audience by sending so many books into the marketplace.
I think they understand how it works now, and they'll just accept that at the end of the year, there's a lot of books, I mean, one of the crazy statistics which they came up with, or that, is that I sell more books than John Grisham, Stephen King, and Tom Clancy together.
Combined.
Yeah.
Oh no, when I saw 1 in 5 adults carrying a thriller or carrying a James Patterson thriller, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's sad, but...
Not for you, it's not.
Not for me, it isn't.
There is one character that you have never collaborated with anyone on. And that's Alex Cross, who is one of my favorites. I've read all of them. Why haven't you brought a collaborator in on Alex Cross?
No reason in particular. I mean, other than I enjoy it. It's the one that I wanted to hold on to. And Max Ride, although that may change if we do any more of them. But I started on my whole, and I didn't. The other one that if I had held on to another one, it would have been the Women's Murder Club.
Oh, really?
But I brought in a collaborator, and that started to work fine. So
Where did Alex Cross come from? Where did he originate?
I think the first thought I had about Cross was I had written a book, Midnight Club, about a handicapped policeman. And I was thinking about, in that period, Hollywood was doing a lot of movies with African-American characters who basically went around with boom boxes on their shoulder, and they're very limited, not the most positive images. And this isn't my experience with African-Americans, and I wanted to create more of a heroic character. The town I grew up in, Newburgh, New York, is very diverse. My grandparents had a restaurant, and an African-American woman was the cook. And at one point, she started having problems with her husband, and so she moved in with us. So she lived in our house for 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I got very close to her and her family. And I used to be down at their house all the time, and I loved the music. They were very bright people, and the music was terrific, and the cooking was terrific. And so I have a little of that in my head about that family, and just growing up in Newburgh.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what Hollywood was portraying, in my opinion. So I wanted to create a heroic, and so he's the antithesis of all those bad caricatures. He's very family oriented. He's bringing up his kids without his wife. His grandmother lives with him.
Yeah.
He's not so much. Well, it varies from episode to episode, but he's trying to solve things with his head. Yeah. Rather than necessarily with brawn, which is why Morgan Freeman wanted to take the part. Oh. He said, I like Alex because Alex solves stuff with his brain.
He also has such a sense of justice. He's down at St. Anthony's Soup Kitchen.
Yeah.
How much of that comes from your personal faith, your Catholic faith?
Well, I think that's the other piece where, my connect to Cross is very strong, because Cross has parts of me. And he's probably the only one of these characters who does have some parts of me. In terms of my own upbringing, Catholic upbringing, I'm not sure, but there certainly is a piece of that being aware of other people, the needs of other people, a Catholic community.
Tell me, where did the shift come from? Was it your son? The shift into kids' literature?
I would say, yeah, that was a big piece of it. When Jack was, when Jack was 8, Jack's very bright, but he wasn't a big reader. And when he was 8 that summer, Sue and I said, here's the deal, you're going to read every day this summer. And he said, do I have to? And we said, yeah, unless you want to live in the garage. That's what we read in our house. But we're going to go out and help with you, and we're going to find some really cool books for you to read.
And you let him choose the books?
No, we influence. We let him choose from the books that we thought he would. And it ranged from Wrinkle in Time, which is a little harder to get into when you're 8, to Percy Jackson and, My Maximum Ride. That was the only one of my books I forced him to read. And by the end of the summer, he had read like a dozen books. His reading skills had gone, so he went from not being a particularly big reader to getting 800 in his SSATs, which is a perfect score. Yeah. And that was the shift with him.
All because of the reading?
Well, that piece of it, yeah. Yeah. But and that's why that's why anybody that's listening, my big, if there's one thing I would ask everybody to do is listening, your kids and your grandkids, get them books. Please get them books. Keep them reading. The more they practice, the better they get. And they must, if they're very bright, it's gonna make them brighter, brightest, which is terrific. And if they're just not reading much, you have to be worried about them, and don't let that happen. People will come up to me and they're always going, I can't get my kid to read. I'm going, do you get them to the dinner table? No, you must do this. Otherwise, nobody would do this, but if you don't, you're sending your child out into the world with a handicap. And you created the handicap.
Yeah, because it's not
your
just
fault.
Being literate. It's really their future and our futures are really at stake.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
What would be your advice to parents and to schools? I know you speak year to year.
I think that the easiest thing is it doesn't matter what they read as much. It's just that they're reading, especially in the beginning. The more they just practice.
Right.
Comic books, okay.
Which is how you started.
Graphic, no, I didn't really, but I read a lot of comics. I didn't start with comic books, but I did read a lot. I was a very good student. I was always first in my class. That was never an issue. I just wasn't that interested in what I was given in the schools, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. If we were teaching movies in the school, which wouldn't be an awful thing. We could talk about characterization and structure and whatever. But if we taught them and we started with Ingmar Bergman movies, we would all go, I don't really like movies too much. But that's what we're doing to these kids. We start out, we're teaching them these little hieroglyphs, oh my God. Then we're going crazy with grammar, oh my God. Then we're giving them too much material that just isn't that interesting to them, or they're not ready for it.
One of the things I love, and you said it just a moment ago, let the kids find their own works.
Within reason. You can stimulate them, but I mean, don't be, and if a kid is going to read the same book 3 times, okay, fine, that's all right. You know,
because the practice is what more important.
But you need to mix in. You know, you need some Harry Potters and middle school to work. You know, you need some of that in there, because the kids should. Yeah, I like that. That was cool, and I can relate to that, and I want to talk about it. This notion of, and it's so hard to get people to wake up. And I don't mean that people are zombies or that they're not thinking human beings, but they just get into these habit ruts. You must get your kids reading. You have to do this. It is your job. It is your responsibility. And it's probably the most important thing you can do. Try to keep them away from the 36-ounce sodas. And that's, you know, that's useful. But they have to read. And you can't take that excuse, they won't read.
What do you make of this Common Core curriculum? A lot of teachers are down on it. They say it discourages literature and kind of exploration for the kids. They're diagramming Dr. Seuss, James.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to sort of pass on the Common Core for the moment. I think that the unfortunate thing, I think one, we can do a better job preparing teachers for the classroom, and we need to. So I don't think we're doing the best job getting teachers ready and encouraging them after they've been teaching for a while, and evaluating them in constructive ways. I think that unions are a good thing, but in some cases, protecting teachers who shouldn't be in the system, that's not a good thing. So you know, you take like Finland, they go, well, how can Finland do so well? Well, one of the big reasons is they treasure their teachers, and they think, and it's such an important job. Right. It's such an important, and it is such an important job. It's valued, and you're not getting in unless you're really good. So that's a piece of it, and a big piece of it. And then the more that's done, probably the less need for Common Core or any of these other aids. But when we make it impossible for teachers to take initiative, and we start pretending that all these schools are at the same level, like you know, the high school out in Pahokee is in trouble now, and nobody's going like, well, you know, it's tough out there, folks. And we can't really equate that with the school here in Palm Beach, and it's not, you know, we're going to work on that, but we don't want to shut that high school down, do we? I mean, that's crazy. And then what, we're going to bus those kids like 30 miles to, So I'm not going to go Common Core as much as common sense, I guess. And how do we get to common sense?
Tell me about...
And common sense, I don't think is going to come from people at some very good universities sort of plotting stuff out in a computer. I'd like it better if all those people had been in classrooms for 10 years, rather than just, well, it can work this way because we have a mathematical model that, you know.
Tell me about your series for children. You've got Maximum Ride, you've got the middle school series.
Yeah, we're loaded.
The Treasure Hunters is fantastic.
And once again, I gotta, in terms of people watching, there's very little you can do that's more important with your kids than getting these kids reading. And the books that I do are designed to get them to read it and go, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, give me another book. So, you know, I was talking to you before about iFunny better be funny.
And it is.
And it is. I have yet to meet, and I'm sure there have to be some who haven't liked this book, which is a key. They read it, they want another book. It doesn't have to be my book, anybody's book. And what this is about is a kid who decides he wants to be a stand-up comedian. He's in middle school. So what do you do when you wanna be something? When you must study. You must work at it, okay? Whatever it's going to be, a baseball player, a doctor, a nurse, a TV personality, you gotta work at it. So this kid works at it. He studies every comedian. He's maniacal. He learns every joke. He starts writing his own jokes. And this book, it's illustrated in the first chapter. As much as he knows, as much as he studied, he's in this contest for the funniest kid in America, the local version of it, and he's choking. He can't, all he can remember are the punchlines. He can't remember the jokes.
Setups.
and then he says, well, you know, we'll get back to this, but let me tell you my story. And in the second chapter, he reveals, he says, it's very early for a twist, but I have to tell you, I can never be a stand-up comedian because I'm in a wheelchair. So then we get the other piece of this, which is the power of comedy to get us past certain hardships in life. And comedy is powerful and really underestimated, I think, in a lot of literary circles and whatever. Comedy is just such a powerful tool for learning, for learning about life, really.
Right. And making us
So that's funny, and this series is, it's a cool, you know, I love this series.
Where did this idea come from? This particular idea about the kid who wanted to be a stand-up comedian.
You know, I don't.
Wheelchair.
I wanted to. I don't get a chance to use a lot of humor in my thrillers.
Well, murder ain't fun.
And but I always had a lot of comedy in me. So the idea of writing comedy really appealed to me. I once wrote a book called Jester, and it's historical. But it's from the point of view of a jester, so it's the person writing the history is a comedian. And I like that because I think that to some extent life is comedic, and I think you're probably not writing a true history unless you see some of the comedy. I mean, how can you write about Washington and not make it somewhat comedic? I mean, it's, you know, it may be tragic comedy,
right. But it's funny. There's humor there.
Yeah, it's, I mean, my God, I can't believe the stuff that's going on.
When I stood in front of a shelf at Barnes & Noble the other day, there was James Patterson romance, there was the middle grade readers, there were the thrillers, murder, historical novel. I mean, you've really covered the whole. King Tut's, the murder of King Tut.
Yeah, I haven't covered it all. I only pretty much, I didn't care for the King Tut book.
Why not? I
don't know. I just didn't feel it was a kind of an honest historical book. I just didn't feel there was enough in it. I didn't feel it went deep enough. I will only write things that I am interested in. Like I would never write a Tom Clancy kind of a military. It just doesn't, I don't understand it really. It doesn't do it for me. I would write a love story, but I wouldn't write a romance. I'm nothing against them. I just don't really get. Love stories I like. Thrillers I like. Comedy I like.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much writing things that I have, that I feel myself.
How would you define the James Patterson brand, given how wide it is?
I don't. I don't talk brands and whatever. I would say that the linkage is if you pick up a James Patterson book, whatever it is, and you have to decide what you want to read.
Right.
Do you like love stories? But if you pick it up, the pages will turn themselves. In other words, they're going to be very pacey, whatever it is. Even a historical novel like Jester it powers along. The kids' books, which is, I think, one of the virtues of them, the kids are not going to get bored, and that's useful. They're going to learn some things, but they're not going to be bored. And learning doesn't have to be boring.
I had no idea how vast. I mean, you're giving books away to schools. You're out evangelizing
and troops.
Parents.
Last year we gave 250,000 books to troops.
Where did this come from? Tell me the origins of that Operation Gratitude.
One of my partners, his son was in Iraq, and he was getting letters every day. So I became very aware of these men and women over there who, to some extent, they feel like they've been forgotten. They're over there, they're doing their thing. People don't. They don't get as much stimulation and encouragement as they probably ought to get. And so I said, I'd like to send books over there. Let's try to figure out a way to do it.
And what's the
feedback
been like?
The feedback is, I'll get letters. I have, I think, like 8 flags that have been sent back. You know, they've wrapped those in a triangle, kind of. Yeah. I don't want anything back.
How do you want to be remembered, and what?
I don't want to be remembered.
Come on,
I want
everybody
to be
wants
here.
to be remembered.
No,
Well,
you know, how is this? This guy's like 800 years old and he's still. You know.
Well, aside from you being the next Moses, that's probably not going to happen. Eventually, our time runs out.
You're probably right.
How do you want to be remembered, and what do you want your readers to recall having experienced your work?
You know, I'd like it that people said it was a good person. He was a good guy. He was a good, you know, told good stories, and he you know, tried to do the right thing as much as he could. No, he wasn't perfect. He had flaws, but he did some good stuff.
I have a favorite James Patterson line. It's in my office, and it reads, "Knowledge is valuable, but imagination is invaluable."
I don't think it's my line, but yeah.
Well, it's attributed to you, and I
All
found
right,
it one day. Is that a motto for you?
You know,
I read somewhere it was.
It makes sense to me, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's not, you know, that's why a lot of times we'll meet certain people and we're just knocked out and go how smart they are because they can retain information. That's only a piece, and it's not as useful as it was in the Middle Ages. We now have all sorts of things to retrieve information for us. The issue is, what are we doing with the information? It's really, I mean, to have the information that's nice, and it's a nice parlor trick, and it can make for interesting dinner guests and whatever. But what are you doing with all that? And now more and more you have young people who have these little pockets of, like, they know everything about video games or everything about cigars or everything, you know, like, okay, great. I mean, that's nice.
Right, but what's the application
that
here?
amuses you. No, I mean, to be amused is okay. That, you know, but then, and what?
Yeah. Well, you have filled in the "and what" beautifully over your career, and we look forward to the rest of it.
Yeah, me too.
You can find out more about James Patterson and all his work by visiting his website at jamespatterson.com.